Welcome to the deep dive. We dig into fascinating sources and pull out the key insights for you. Today, we're jumping into 21 Days of Effective Communication by Ian Tuhovsky. This one's really for anyone who's ever found communication, tricky. Or maybe you've struggled finding things to say or just felt that bit of social anxiety. Our goal here is to unpack the best bits, the actionable stuff from the book, and turn it into things you can actually use, like right away.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how Tohosky pushes back against this idea that, communication is just a talent you either have or you don't.
Right.
He sees it as a skill, like any other skill, something you can actually practice and get better at. So this deep dive is kind of a shortcut to understanding those core ideas he presents.
That's a really hopeful way to frame it, isn't it? Because if it's a skill, well, then we can all improve. Tofsky actually starts pretty personally, doesn't he? Talking about his own struggles.
He does. He talks about being shy, second-guessing himself in conversations, feeling a bit distant even when he had friends.
Which makes you think, if communication is supposed to be so natural, why is it so hard for so many of us?
Well, Tohosky argues that our life experiences,
Hmm.
they can kind of get in the way, build up these little barriers.
Like what kind of experiences?
Things like maybe being bullied back in school, or if you grew up in a family that was super critical, lots of high achievers maybe.
Mhm.
Those things can make you hesitant. And he also touches on the habit formation idea, the whole 21 days thing.
Yeah, the magic number.
Right. He points out it's not really magic. Research shows it can take anywhere from like 18 days up to, well, almost 250 days to really lock in a new habit.
Wow, okay.
But he says 21 days is a great starting point, gives you some momentum.
So if we're starting to build the skill, where does he say to begin? Day one.
Day one is all about listening, active listening. He
Yeah.
calls poor listening a grave mistake.
Okay, but what does good listening actually involve? It's not just staying quiet, right?
No, definitely not. It's much more active. He brings in Carl Rogers, the psychotherapist.
Mhm.
And the core idea is that if you really let someone talk freely, without jumping in, they often figure out their own stuff. It empowers them.
So less about fixing, more about facilitating their own process.
Exactly. And the tips he gives are practical, like use small signals and nod and uh-huh, just to show you're tuned in.
Okay.
Let people, especially if they're upset, kind of run out of steam.
Yeah.
Just give them that space.
Right. Don't interrupt the flow.
And crucially, don't play the armchair psychologist. No jumping in with advice unless they ask.
That's a hard one sometimes.
It is. And he distinguishes between rephrasing to check you understood them, which is good,
Yeah.
versus just parroting their words back, which feels kind of empty. Check your assumptions, too. Don't just project your own stuff onto them.
That really does change the dynamic. It makes listening feel like a really engaged activity. And his first exercise, the practical bit.
Super simple, but effective. He suggests just making a 20-minute phone call.
To who?
A friend, a relative, someone you haven't chatted with in a while. And the only goal is to practice that active listening.
That's clever. You practice the skill and you strengthen a connection. A double win.
Precisely.
Okay, so from listening, let's talk about mindful language. Day 5 seems key here, swapping but for and using yet. Tiny words, big impact.
Huge impact, according to Tuhovsky. Think about but. When you say, I'd love to go on vacation, but I'm scared to fly.
Yeah, it sounds like the fear cancels out the desire.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
creates a wall. But if you swap it to, and I'd love to go on vacation and I'm scared to fly, suddenly it's different.
How so?
It becomes a desire plus a challenge to overcome, not a desire blocked by a challenge. He argues this tiny shift can move you from feeling kind of desperate to feeling hopeful.
Interesting. And he mentions but makes people defensive too.
Yeah, it often signals you're about to negate whatever you just said. And then there's yet, adding yet to a negative statement like, I haven't found a solution yet.
That implies it's still possible.
Right. It signals persistence, positivity. It tells yourself and others that you haven't given up. It's surprisingly powerful.
So these are really tools for reframing, both for yourself and in how you communicate with others. Okay, related to careful language, day 6, watching your pronouns, less I.
Yeah, limiting the I talk.
Mm-hmm.
Now, psychologists might argue about whether it directly means someone's narcissistic,
Mm-hmm.
but Tuhovsky's point is more practical. He says the average person does notice excessive I talk and often links it to being self-absorbed.
Okay, but sometimes you need to use I, right?
Absolutely. He clarifies that. It's appropriate when you're being assertive, I feel undervalued, or when you're stating an opinion that might be controversial, I think perhaps, or even claiming credit, if that's important in your job context.
Makes sense.
But he really pushes for more we talk.
Why we?
Because we instantly creates a sense of connection, of shared experience. Think we had a tough quarter versus I found the quarter tough. It just feels more inclusive, more intimate.
Small word, big difference in feeling. So these are subtle shifts, but they can really change the tone of an interaction.
Definitely. They help make sure you're connecting, not just talking at people.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. It's not just what we say, but how we say it. Day 11 gets into voice and speaking style.
Yeah, this is fascinating. He cites research showing that people, both men and women who speak with a lower pitch, are often perceived as more confident, more competent.
Really? Is there a way to work on that?
He suggests simple things. Sit up straight, breathe deeply from your diaphragm, count slowly to find that comfortable lower range. Nothing forced, just finding your natural resonance.
Okay.
And he offers vocal exercises too, like if your voice trembles when you're nervous. Things like hissing gently as you exhale or doing scales like repeating me, nee, nee, nee.
Little exercises to build vocal stability.
Exactly. And a big one, cut out the verbal tics, the ums, the arouse, the likes, the you knows.
Oh, that's a tough habit to break for many people.
It is. He even shares a story about how embarrassed he was when a friend pointed out his own habit he just hadn't noticed.
So self-awareness is key there.
Absolutely. Other tips include keeping sentences relatively short, using pauses, strategically silence can be powerful, and varying your pitch and tone so you don't sound monotone. It's about sounding engaged and dynamic.
That connects really well to giving feedback, which can be tricky. Day 12 has a specific technique for that.
Yes, a really simple but effective rule. Focus on the behavior, not the character.
What does that mean in practice?
He uses an example of a former boss. If an employee was wasting time, the boss wouldn't call them lazy. That just starts an argument about their identity.
Right, because they'll just deny being lazy.
Exactly. Instead, the boss focused on the facts. You spent X hours on non-work websites this week. Our contract states Y. This impacted Z deadline. It's about the observable actions and their consequences.
So it's harder to argue with facts than with labels.
Precisely. Like telling your teenager your room is messy and needs cleaning by Saturday or consequence versus yelling you're such a slob. The first addresses the action and sets an expectation. The second attacks who they are.
And that preserves the relationship while still addressing the issue. That's really useful.
It encourages change without creating unnecessary conflict.
Okay, this next one feels really foundational. Day 13 is about uncovering your own communication background, digging into your past.
Yeah, Tuhovsky really believes that self-knowledge is crucial for making lasting changes. You need to understand why you communicate the way you do.
He uses a story to illustrate this, right?
Yes, the story of Jenny. She's a successful lawyer, but she struggled with being assertive. She just felt awkward doing it.
Okay.
Through coaching, she realized her mother had a very passive-aggressive style, and Jenny had unconsciously absorbed that model. Assertiveness felt unnatural because it wasn't what she grew up seeing.
So realizing that connection was the key.
It was a huge part of it. Realizing she didn't have to be a copy of her mother, she could consciously choose different role models, other assertive women lawyers she admired, and that insight, plus practice, helped her get promoted.
So the idea is for us, for you listening, to do some similar reflection.
Exactly. He poses questions for you to think about. What were your parents like socially? Did they argue constructively? What explicit or implicit rules about talking did they pass down? Were you encouraged to speak your mind?
It's like communication archaeology on yourself.
Kind of. Understanding your roots helps you be more intentional about the communicator you want to become.
Okay, let's move into some more advanced strategies. Day 19 is about crafting a persuasive message. He introduces a specific structure.
Yes, Alan H. Monroe's motivated sequence. It's a classic 5-step process from the 1930s, but still incredibly relevant for getting people to take action.
Okay, what are the steps?
First, grab attention. You need an immediate hook, a surprising fact, an emotional story, something to make people listen.
Right, cut through the noise.
Second, establish the need. Clearly show there's a problem. Why is the current situation not okay? What happens if nothing changes? Make the pain point clear.
Make it urgent.
Third, satisfy the need. This is where you present your solution. Explain how it works and how it directly solves the problem you just highlighted.
Here's the answer.
Fourth, paint a picture of the future. Use visualization. Describe what happens if they don't act the negative consequences. But also, vividly describe the positive future if they do adopt your solution. Make it appealing.
Contrast the outcomes.
And finally, fifth, spell out the next steps. The call to action. What exactly do you want them to do now? Make it clear, simple, and easy to follow.
That seems like a really solid framework. Does he give an example?
Yeah, he walks through using it to boost workplace productivity. Starts with a statistic about employee time, attention, explains the cost, need, proposes weekly check-ins, satisfaction, describes better teamwork versus continued issues, visualization, and ends with managers scheduling the meetings, action.
Very practical. You can see how that would work for almost any persuasive situation.
Absolutely. It guides the listener logically and emotionally.
Okay, we're nearing the end of the 21 days. What's the final piece of advice in day 21?
It's a simple but powerful one. Drop the cliches.
Drop the cliches, like think outside the box or at the end of the day.
Exactly. Things like smooth as silk or what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Hmm.
He argues they're not necessarily bad, but they're overused.
So they lose their impact.
Completely.
Yeah.
They just become filler noise. Listeners barely register them. His advice is to consciously try to eliminate them from your speech and writing.
And replace them with.
Your own words. Make your own comparisons, your own descriptions. It forces you to think more creatively, use a richer vocabulary.
So instead of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Maybe try something like his example. What doesn't knock you down only helps you stand firmer. It says the same thing, but it sounds fresh. It makes you sound like an original thinker.
That's a great challenge. It forces you to be more precise and engaging with your language.
Both in speaking and writing.
Wow. Okay. What a comprehensive journey through communication skills this has been. From the absolute basics, like really listening, understanding our own communication patterns.
Yeah, and those subtle but powerful language tweaks like using and instead of but or the power of yet.
Right, through to refining your voice, giving better feedback by focusing on behavior.
And then the more structured stuff like the motivated sequence for persuasion.
It really covers a lot of ground. Tuhovsky's 21 Days seems like a genuinely practical roadmap.
It really does. We've touched on so much adapting to different generations, email etiquette, asking for advice effectively, even how to handle nosy people gracefully.
Yes. That one's useful. And ending with that challenge to ditch cliches and find your own voice.
It all comes back to that core idea.
Yeah.
Communication is a skill you can actively cultivate.
So thinking about everything we've covered, the question for you, listening, is what's the one habit, the one technique you heard today that you want to focus on first?
Just picking one thing to start with.
And how might practicing just that one thing start to change your conversations, your relationships, maybe even open up new opportunities?
Because as Tuhovsky really emphasizes, this isn't just about sounding better. It's about connecting better, feeling more confident, and ultimately having more agency in your interactions and, well, your life. The effort, he suggests, really pays off.